Bob Ostrom has illustrated more than 250 children's books by nearly all of the major trade publishers in the best-known children's media markets such as the Disney Channel, the Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon.
You don't know, you just don't know, you know? So once you get exposed to it, it starts to open up your mind and make you realize, hey, there's a better approach to this, or hey, I could do this, or wow, remember how like I was thinking this, but I couldn't do it before? Now I can do it, and this could be part of my artwork, you know? So
what is it about Adobe Illustrator, Bob, that makes it ideal for this exact kind of, I mean, it's famous for logos and signage, and what is it about the program?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So one of the things that I think Illustrator does best is when it comes to increasing or reducing your size, you can always maintain your resolution. You don't have to worry about pixelation. So like when we work with Photoshop, you know, you have to say, okay, what size is my image going to be? How big is it eventually going to be? Am I going to get so large that I start to see, you know, the little stair-steppy edge kind of thing? Yeah. You see on, you know, that's pixelation. So we don't have to worry about that when we're working with vector. And that's why vector is so sought after. So when you look at a logo like this, it could work just as well on a business card as it could on the side of a bus.
There's somebody's corporate identity, they can blow it up as big as they want. And
absolutely.
Take it anywhere. We're living in an increasingly visual society, yes? Or people they're wanting to see visual branding, and they're more used to it as a society.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So if you need versatility, this is the way to go. Now, there are some things that Illustrator doesn't do well, which are basically manipulating photos, and obviously that's Photoshop for that. But the images that we create, the vector images that we create, we can't put online either. So we need to convert them over to a raster image in order to get them online. Yeah. So those are the two things I think that maybe that Illustrator doesn't do that well. It does a lot of other stuff great, you know. So like we look at Illustrator and we think, hey, this is a program for drawing with, but you know, it's also a program that we can use to do layout and design. And it does a great job with that. And that's why I love it for logos, because when I can start working with type and playing with type, nothing beats Illustrator for that. I think it's just the greatest for that. So I love doing that kind of stuff. Let me show you another quick thing here. Let me see if I jump on my screen share real quick and show you a little layout that I did here. Got to switch this over. Forgive me, it's been a little while since I've been in this program. Not Illustrator, but
Hangout platform.
It always seems to change, you know. It's like
I know.
From one minute to another. Okay, here's something kind of silly that I did, but this was laid out in Illustrator, so you can see, you know, we've got the type. We can even work with images. Obviously, we can do some manipulation with images, but when it comes to actually, you know, modifying exposure, that kind of stuff, that's Photoshop. But we can do great layout and design in there. And so this is something that I put together, you know, I just wanted to throw this online real quick and have a little bit of fun with it. Yeah. So I was promoting a class or something I was doing. I don't know, I was just getting goofy in my in my backyard. You know, so this is something that I did about a year ago or so, and I was just using it as a promotional piece. But you can see that, you know, Illustrator allows us to do a lot of design and kind of work with text and that kind of stuff too. So it's a really versatile program. Now, Photoshop obviously does that too, but I think Illustrator does a better job.
You were able to import your photograph into Illustrator and then design around it and lay your type on it and just go to town with it. Okay.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of fun doing that kind of stuff.
And I love the flames you've got around your.
I was just getting really silly with this one.
You're crunching the processing to make your deadline. So how does one really learn a program as immensely complicated as Illustrator? Where does one start with something like this? You're a good person to ask because you teach it. So
yeah, sure. So here's an example of you know, if I flip screens here. So here's an example of how I typically used to work with Illustrator. So when I first started out, I did a lot of my drawing by hand. So you can see that I've got a sketch here and then the finished product Illustrator. So what I used to do a lot of times would be to take my drawing, sketch it out by hand on a piece of paper. I would scan it in and then trace that. And you can see that there are some, you know, I clean things up a little bit here between the two illustrations. But as I started to work with this, I realized, hey, you know what? I can still keep that hand-drawn feel, you know, because I used to love to draw on paper and draw by hand. Since then, I've got a Cintiq, so I draw most of my stuff on the Cintiq now. But I take my illustrations into Illustrator. I trace my line work. make it nice and slick and clean, and then I start to add my color to it. So really, you know, there are a lot of different ways to use it, and I see people now who actually just draw right in Illustrator. They're that comfortable with it. I find it slightly counterintuitive because we're working with, you know, connecting dots basically. So we're looking at anchor points and that kind of thing versus actually drawing. So when you're, you know, when you're working with a program, you have to kind of think of what does the program do best and how do I work within the constraints of that program to get done what I need to get done. So the more you can understand about these programs, the better that you can do with them. You know, so you look at illustrations like what Wendy's doing, you know, and she's using it in a whole different way than I'm using it. But you can see, you know, that her, excuse me, her artistic abilities show through in her drawing and what she's doing. And then same thing with anybody else who uses it. It's really like I said, it's just sort of an extension of what you're, you know, what you can think of. And it's no more than a paintbrush or, you know, or a pencil, you know.
Well, so to start learning to use the tools, start with just a few of the tools. Learn to import your sketch into the program, and then learn the few tools to get you going, dropping in your color, and get up and going with it, and then kind of go from there.
Well,
the way to teach
here's what I'm thinking is, first of all, you know, you have to figure out like which program is going to work best for you. You know, maybe it's not going to be Illustrator, maybe Photoshop is your thing. You really want to consider, you know, what it is that you want to get out there and what you're going to use this program for. So for a guy like me, Illustrator is a great program because I do a lot of cartooning. I do a lot of, you know, slick line work. I do logos and that kind of stuff. So it works great for me. But there are times when Photoshop might work better as well. So I think the best thing that people can do if they want to get started with these programs is to learn a little bit about them. Which program is going to give you what you need, and then kind of go from there. So I would say if you have the ability to take a class, that's going to shorten your learning curve tremendously. If you have the ability to work directly with somebody who does tutoring like I do, it's going to shorten that learning curve even more. You know, so it depends on how much time you have to put into it, and then, you know, how long do you want that learning curve to be? You know, so I taught myself how to use this program, and it took me forever. It took me a good year to learn Photoshop. You know. Yeah. But there are resources out there, and there are more now than there ever have been before, you know, so you can go online and you can find the perfect class doing, you know, targeting just what you want to do. If you find that maybe you need a little bit more direct contact, you know, find somebody like me who does tutoring and can get you through some of those things that you might get stuck on.
How does your tutoring work, Bob? Can you give us a little?
Sure. Yeah. So if some, you know, like I work with a lot of professionals who are, you know, they need to get stuff out, and they need to shorten their learning curve because they don't want to spend forever learning this program. Yeah. So we'll work together on, you know, a project basis or just sort of giving them the things that they need to understand to get done what they want to get done. So a lot of times, like when you start with a program, you get a very broad base. You know, and what I do is I help them narrow that down into the area that they need to work with. If you want to get a little bit more specific, those books, you know, and the online courses and that kind of thing, they tend to be a little bit broader. So programs like what we're doing here it tend to sort of narrow it down and pinpoint that focus.
Okay, get in, get out. Are these online tutoring sessions you're making it one-on-one, or are you doing them in your studio?
Yeah, I do. I started out doing them in my local area, you know, so I would meet students that I would be teaching. I teach at Wake Tech here in North Carolina. So a lot of my students would need a little extra help, and they'd be like, oh, can you tutor for me? And I'd be like, great, let's do that. Recently, about 2 years ago, I realized that, hey, you know what, I could bring this stuff online because I was getting a lot of requests from people who couldn't make my classes. Can you teach me online? And so I started to look at some of the things that we have. So we have things like, you know, this Google Hangout that we're doing. It's just as easily, you know, to do a screen share here and teach people online. So I thought, wow, that's great. Let's do that, you know? So I do a lot of that kind of stuff. I teach people all over the world. I taught, I had a student in India, had one in Australia. I think it's just the coolest thing. You know? Yeah, it is. So I gotta get my little, you know, my time calculator out and say, okay, let's see, where are you? You're here. Okay, so if we meet at 11:30 your time, 12 p.m. my time. Right. Right. You know, and we're 12 hours apart or whatever. You know, so we got to figure out like how we're gonna make that work. I don't know. I think it's just the coolest thing. You know, and it's great to get to meet people that are, people you'd never normally meet, you know. So I just love it. It's just so much fun.
There are so many built-in efficiencies to the new online way of learning. Bob, I want to share can I share the screen for a second and take them
Sure,
to your
absolutely.
website? I'd love them to see all the different
Yeah, okay.
styles you work in. Hang on one second. Yeah, I was enjoying getting into your articles about copyright. You got a great blog and everything. Okay, so this is a site I really encourage people to go to, but this is some of the licensing work that you were talking about, isn't it? With the characters we all know and love.
Yeah, that's right. So I got my start, you know, like I said, doing licensing, and those characters were, most of those that you're seeing there were done by hand, because you know, when I started doing the licensing stuff, it was probably about almost, oh, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, you know, so we didn't really have a lot of computer stuff back in those days.
Yeah.
I mean, it was out there, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now, and the programs were a little clunky when they first started. So when we first started doing Herbie, I was a little bit green as far as using Illustrator for these books. And so what I did was I created all my line art in Illustrator, and I brought it into Photoshop because I was just more comfortable illustrating in Photoshop. But as I look at this now, I wish that I would have done it in Illustrator, because I probably could have cut my work time in half, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, these illustrations were created, the line work was created in Illustrator. So you can see that the line work is kind of slick. And I really used to love those cartoons. You know, as a kid, I used to love Saturday morning and watching cartoons. So I always wanted to kind of reflect that in my art. And I finally got an opportunity with this series. I think we had, gosh, there was probably 50 books in this series. So we had to get this stuff out fast. And I had a guy that I worked with out in Las Vegas. His name is Richard, and he just did a bang up job helping me with this stuff. But I think we did this in 2 batches. One batch was, you know, the first year we did it, which was 25 books, and it ended up being close to 800 pieces of art. So we had to figure out a way that we could get this stuff done quickly, and we could make it look great at the same time. And doing that digitally was really the only way. There was no way this was going to be done by hand and be done on time. So, you know, we were working on this stuff together, where I would do the line art and then he would do the color, and then we would switch back and forth as needed. But wow. I think this book is a great example of how Illustrator could have been used to its fullest potential and save me a little bit of time. But you can see, obviously, you know, it worked out just fine using Illustrator and Photoshop.
Yes, great. Well, that really helps. I'm going to get back here to our Hangout screen. Before
Sure.
I do, let me just take a look at your. There's on the site. There's information about
so if you
classes.
I actually have a separate site where if you want to go and take classes, you can find me at bobteachesart.com.
Okay.
I put that site together a couple of years ago, and what I'm doing right now is I'm focusing on the tutoring sessions. So if you're interested in doing like tutoring or that kind of stuff, you can find me at Bob Teaches Art. I'm putting together some classes now. I mean, you can purchase classes through this site, but I'm working now with another group of teachers that I know here locally, and we're going to be putting together some classes that I'm really, really excited about. And I can't get too much more into it because it's still in the development phase, but I'm really excited about it. And I'll be making my announcements early next year as to how that's going to go. But we have some great stuff coming up. I think it's going to be really fun for people.
I really like this little section here. Let's see. Oh, I'm on the Bob Teaches Art.
Yeah. So on my what I do write a lot about, like, what is the best program for you, and so I'll go into talking about, like, you know, which program does what, and then what they do well, and then how do you apply those to what you might like to do. So if we talk about, you know, Illustrator, great for artists, great for designers. I think it's, at this point, it's considered a must if you want to get any kind of job in design, you know. So
in design work. Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see all those kind of little write-ups either on, you know, my normal site, which is bobostrom.com, or on the teaching site, which is bobteachesart.com.
I liked what you said on your about page on your Illustrator website about cartooning is big business. And we, you know, if we'd only appreciated that in high school and we were doing the cartooning in our notebooks, and knowing that there was no way in the world we were going to go out and get a job doing that, getting to do that all day long. But you turned that upside down and made it into a kind of a cottage industry for yourself. And look at all the brands that you've
Yeah. So it's, you know, you brought up a great point. I had a teacher one time, and I was sitting in his class, and I just never paid attention because I just wasn't interested. It was some sort of history class or something. And he came over to my desk and he saw my drawings, you know, and he grabbed my notebook out of my hand and he held it up in front of the class and he said, you know, he said, normally I would get really angry when I see this kind of stuff, but I think, you know, one day this guy's probably going to be a great artist. And he put that back down on my desk. He probably forgot about it, but I always kind of kept that in the back of my mind, you know. I said, someday I'm going to find a way, you know, to make a living doing what I really love to do, you know. And so it wasn't easy, but there is a market for this kind of stuff if you really look around, you know. So that's kind of what I was getting at when I was doing that little write-up there is, you know, figure out what you do best and then consider how can you make a living at that, you know. If you can, you're going to be the luckiest guy in the world, because if you love what you do, it's just not work. And I know everybody's heard that saying before, but it's really true, you know. So I've been doing this for almost, oh my gosh, 20 something years. I don't know. And I just have a ball. I mean, sometimes it gets stressful and I work a lot of long hours, but it's just great. I love doing what I do, you know.
It's amazing how you do as much as you do and meeting the deadlines that you've got and teaching and doing things like this hangout. So this has been just a real treat, Bob. I know I don't want to greedily keep you for any longer than you've been so gracious in just spending this time with us. And I know you now need to get back to work, back to the
always, yes, I do. I always have deadlines.
Back to the Cintiq. But we so appreciate your joining us, and we will put those links up and look forward to hearing about your you know, anything else you got going moving forward, including those the classes in Raleigh coming up. So
thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It was great talking with you today. I really had a lot of fun.
Great talking to you, Bob. Thanks again.
Okay, take care.